Travel, again, thanks to social media, took on the contours of a commodity.
Yes.
Go here, get this photo. Go here, have this drink.
I've always been curious about the machinations behind this particular industry.
I think because the travel industry understands that authenticity is a word that is like long past its sell-by date.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out what the next version of that is and what the rhetoric around that needs to be.
You can just get on ChatGPT or book your flight and then book your own tours if you want to do a tour. I mean, it is doable.
It's 100% doable.
This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investing in more than 35 stock markets worldwide. This episode is also brought to you by Azza Fahmy Jewelry. Welcome again to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad. We're continuing my conversation with travel journalist and editor Maria Shollenbarger. Today we're talking about how travel preferences have changed since COVID and how certain destinations start trending and why, and the future of travel in the age of AI. As someone who used to be kind of peripheral a little bit in your world, and just observing travel, as a consumer, there are trends in travel. Like there are trends in fashion. You look at Condé Nast Traveler and they have the top 10 destinations of 2025, let's say. Who decides on that? How does that become a thing?
Ooh, that's a big question, only because when I started, it was the mid-2000s, which is 20 years ago now.
Let's not say that.
Sorry.
For us.
I'm 30. Well before the advent of social media.
Yeah.
Certainly before social media had saturated every aspect of our lives. And that was a paradigm shift in who decides what in travel.
That's right.
As you know, as the whole world knows. I think a lot of it is just editors sitting down, talking about looking at research, looking at what they've heard, looking at what they've seen, looking at what's being sent to them, looking at who's opening where.
What I'm wondering is how much of it is, as you said, based on research and data, and how much of it is hype? Like, for example, let's say that last year's trend, right now, Japan is seriously hot.
Yeah.
And this year is probably the biggest tourism year for Japan. How did that momentum happen?
So we just did our travel issue, and we talked about the oversaturation of certain markets. And New York Magazine did a very funny travel issue that was almost entirely dedicated to this. The travel panic, what's going on in the world. And I quoted New York Magazine in my story with the quote about, first of all, it was the dollar, the extremely favorable U.S. dollar exchange made it very easy for Americans to go there at a time when there was a war in Gaza, which Americans freak out. The minute something happens, they're canceling left and right.
Sure.
I'm sure numbers on the river here were down.
They were.
I'm sure,
They were. But it can be as simple as that, as you said, a geopolitical crisis somewhere makes people migrate somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for instance, during COVID, there were some really, really brilliant issues of all the U.S. magazines rediscovering U.S. destinations.
That's
sort of like, okay, Santa Ynez Valley in California, which is north of Santa Barbara, between Santa Barbara and kind of where the Big Sur coast starts.
Your old,
my stomping ground,
your home ground,
my kiddie ground.
Yeah.
That had it got a huge amount of play during COVID and in the ensuing years until now, because people who normally would have gone to Sicily or Tuscany or Mendoza or wherever it is that they go for their wine country had to stay in California. So that, Napa's too expensive, Sonoma's quite saturated. Let's explore this more southerly destination, which actually has, and interestingly, Jancis Robinson, who's the wine critic at the FT, just her Sunday column last week was about this emerging wine destination. And there's some really interesting restaurants that have opened up. Auberge Resorts, which is a big American company, just opened a very sweet hotel there. I think it was last year or the year before. So it can just be a critical mass of these things.
Yeah.
It can be a critical mass of things, some of which are hyper championed by a really savvy PR.
That's right.
With a lot of money.
It's a confluence of things.
Exactly.
It's a confluence of things.
Exactly.
So post-COVID, we know that the travel world kind of ignited, right? I think the lockdown made everyone realize there's more to life than material things. And luxury I think for a lot of people became about experiences. People were willing to put money into trips, into experiences, going off the grid, doing really, really creative and unusual things.
And importantly, that is a trend that I felt already had legs in, for lack of a better term, the West, in Europe and the UK and very, very wealthy
Before
American.
COVID, you felt
Before
it?
COVID, that was
Okay.
starting sort of, we were covering a lot
I
of that
see.
kind of thing, multi-generational travel,
Right.
cruises,
But that would have been at the higher end, I think.
at the higher end also.
But I think the concept began to trickle down to a more like demographic.
Yes, exactly.
Correct?
Well, and all through, yes, it did.
It became more accessible
It did.
and
But
more
then
more aspirational.
accessible and aspirational,
Yeah.
and then again, cost effective, a lot more cost friendly
That's
after
right.
COVID, because destinations that were suffering terribly. Yeah. I mean, there was an explosion of over tourism,
For sure.
revenge tourism, which became in many destinations over tourism. And it, a bit unfortunately to my mind, travel, again, thanks to social media, achieved, like, took on the contours of a commodity.
Yes.
Go here, get this
Sure.
photo, go here, have this
Sure.
drink, must have this,
Yeah.
I heard a story, you hear stories about people kind of having an absolute meltdown if the specific flavor they wanted to put on their feed, which isn't really a world that I operate in professionally. That's what I do at the magazine is a completely different world. But living half of my time in Florence, Italy, it's inescapable.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
places that I can get a table at in the middle of January as a walk-in become completely inaccessible to me.
But a lot of cities are now shutting the doors, right? And taxing tourists to come in. Venice, I mean.
And regulating, I heard, this is completely conjecture, I heard socially.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that Rome is going to start cracking down on Airbnbs
Yeah.
quite significantly.
A lot of cities are doing that.
Florence has retroactively made it, you can't put, there are no new properties allowed on, they have to be longer term rent.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair on the residents.
It's really not, and there are cities where it's obviously completely,
Venice
gutted, and Lisbon is a sad,
as well.
sad disaster.
That's right.
But I think it's also, not that I'm a huge fan necessarily, but I think it's also important to acknowledge how Airbnb in its early years made travel accessible to people in a way. And it did deliver on the live like a local, because you were staying in a home, which meant you had to go to the local market. You had, it too was became a monster, but and in that way.
But it allowed people to stay longer as well. So they got to know those cities better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to travel.
When we come back after the break, Maria tells me about the future of travel agents in the age of ChatGPT, when itineraries can be prepared in the blink of an eye. This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investment across more than 35 stock markets worldwide. With EFG Hermes One, you can buy and sell orders in real time for immediate execution across multiple global markets. You can keep track of your favorite stocks by creating and customizing multiple watch lists, and make informed investment decisions with their advanced technical analysis tools to study market trends and investor behavior. So supercharge your financial journey and download the EFG Hermes One app on the Apple App Store and on Google Play and start investing today. Welcome back. You're listening to part 2 of my conversation with Maria Shollenbarger. So tell me, I know because you and I have spoken a lot, but your day-to-day life is really hectic. And you don't have it doesn't feel to me like you have control over your time.
Well, I do, it's my day-to-day life is, the one thing I will say is that the initial feedback from a lot of people is, God, you have the jammiest job on the planet. And I sort of think, you didn't see me eating that warmed up half a burrito last night at 11:30 while I'm meeting a deadline, or I am on the road a lot.
Yes.
So what I commission in my role, I commission and edit the travel content of HTSI, which is online and obviously in print.
And what is your team? How many people do you have within that?
I have no team. It is me.
But I thought you assigned some journalists to some.
So we have a stable of contributing editors.
Yes.
Some of whom kind of specialize in travel, but I'll work with all of them if they bring me a great pitch. And additionally, people from all over pitch. One of the things I have found that takes up more of my time than it ever did before is just managing the inbox, because people pitch from all over the place. There's a lot of cachet to all sections of the magazine. People obviously want to write fashion, they want to write about jewelry, but it has been my 16 going on 17-year experience that the thing most people really want to do is write travel because you get sent on quite extraordinary trips.
Yeah.
We get a lot of cold pitches, all of which need to be read because in and amongst just the bullshit ones, excuse my language, sometimes there's somebody with a really brilliant idea.
There's a gem in there.
Yeah, or somebody you're like, gosh, this person looks really interesting. They don't have the widest CV I've ever seen, but they wrote a really beautiful pitch and like, let's just give them the chance. And that's a lot of my time. I write a column 2 times a month, which is a news column called Travelista.
And is there a specific theme to the column or?
It is news. It's meant to be kind of news. And now quite specifically, it's been more themed than it used to be. It used to just read as like a written through news column of 2 pages. Now it's kind of, there might be a theme of like off-piste villages and where's the nicest place to stay, walking trips.
Nice.
Or just a new kind of hotel.
And tell me, like, give me an idea of what a month is like. Is there, for example, are you on the road 2 weeks a month? Is there like a fixed amount of time that you choose not to be traveling?
That is where my time is not necessarily my own to manage. Not all the time, but there are times of the year. Like I was explaining before we went on camera, September to Christmas is silly season. I mean, it's just not least because of these conferences. There was one in Puglia. There's one in Cannes in France at the beginning of December. I'm here a lot right now for personal and work reasons. I would say, yeah, I'm on the road 1 week to 2 weeks a month.
Okay.
But very often I try to go up to London every 5 or 6 weeks to check in the office, cross over with my editors, talk about ideas.
Yeah, and presumably that's a good opportunity to look ahead.
It's a very good opportunity to look ahead.
Right?
And sometimes we're doing stories that will run next fall.
Right now. Oh, that far ahead.
Sometimes we just pulled together another story about the Galapagos that literally came together in 3 weeks. Gave us all a few white hairs, but it's a beautiful story, so it's worth it.
Because you don't actually think of travel as being current and needing to rush and get a story out.
Only if it involves an exclusive on a hotel property or something really interesting happening in a destination.
Is that common?
If you have a big name hotel like let's pretend
a chain of some kind.
Let's pretend that Claridge's closed down. Well, as it did a few years ago, they added all the subterranean floors and everything. There was kind of a big bidding war for that story amongst certainly UK titles. And then they're trying to schedule a media plan because they wanted to come out with a big splash, but they're trying to schedule a media plan as well. So you're negotiating around that. And we probably have 3 or 4 of those stories a year.
Yeah. What do you do in terms of photography when you're traveling? Do you have someone, like when you travel, with you, or how does that work? Or do the hotels provide you with like
for smaller stories? One of the seminal changes to the magazine since Joe has come on as its editor, which is 1,000,000% to the good, is that we've started really budgeting for photographers for travel features. We used to rely on visuals provided pickup imagery by the hotel or by a destination or a Getty, exactly. Stock images, which sometimes really undersold a story. We'd have somebody really like a Lucia van der Post or someone who used to write these incredible pieces, and then the imagery was a bit meh.
Or that it's imagery that other people can have as well.
Exactly. That had run before or that was just not part of the visual identity. We have a really distinct visual identity now.
Yes, you do.
And distinctive also. And so I sometimes travel with photographers. There's a guy called Stefan Gifthaler who's Milanese, and he and I have been on some very fun jobs together. We like to nobody else does. We call ourselves the A-team.
Yeah.
Just makes us feel
it's fun.
But
it's fun.
He's wonderful because
and which one of you is Mr. T? That's the question.
I let him be Mr. T.
He's Mr. T.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the handy guy who fixes everything. So sometimes I'm handed somebody, and that usually is, I've never had that work out badly when I'm with someone. I traveled all over Italy with Stefan. I've traveled to Namibia with a great guy based in New York called Adrian Go. I had the time of my life. I think it was his first time in Africa.
Wow.
So that was quite
That's always special.
Yes.
I want to ask you, and this is actually, I'll just pause and explain about why I'm going to ask this question, because, the show's theme is always about people's pivot points. And we've been running now for 5 years. And I realized that we'd look back a lot. And I wanted to start thinking slightly differently about my theme of the show. So I'm going to start, you're the first episode, by the way, of the year of 2026. So you're my guinea pig for this question. So I'm basically asking people to look forward. And I want you to look forward to what you think is going to be happening in the industry as a whole. AI has taken over everyone's consciousness and thinking. And is there something about AI that worries you about for the travel industry? Is there something that's on the radar coming up that, you're noticing a change that's going to be challenging for the industry? Is there something positive that's going to be happening in the next year, 2 years, 3 years that's kind of making you begin to think about what's coming next?
It's interesting that you ask this question because driving back from Siwa with two friends, 7, 8 hours in the car,
Yeah.
um, we discussed this, and I think there's going to be a real kind of bifurcation of people's ideas, demographics, ideas of what luxury travel is.
Mhm.
Because what I know is that I find it deeply depressing when I walk into a hotel that has like a boilerplate design, a super famous designer who nonetheless has been working in Dubai and Sydney and Sao Paulo and Los Angeles. And so you sort of,
They have a standard
yes,
style.
and the astronomical fees for these places and big name restaurants moving in. These feel like,
It's like the Hilton and the Marriott of today. Like that sort of the standardization of it all.
exactly. And it's a very, very rarefied form of standardization. But it's more broadly, it's a lens on luxury that I don't think reflects how a certain kind of person feels about luxury anymore. Um, Most principally in its attachment to what things cost. I think it's really disgusting to pay 3,300
For a hotel
euros a
room.
night for a
I
hotel
agree.
room.
But I wonder, Maria, if that is just the bigger chains catching up late to what they think the modern luxury traveler wants.
I think there are different iterations of the modern existing, contemporaneously. Contemporarily, excuse me. There are markets that want that. There are emerging markets that very much find that that's, people who have more money than I'll ever have, but for whom we're writing sometimes at the magazine. And there are certain places where that doesn't. If I'm in Bangkok, for sure I want to stay at the Oriental because it's a beautiful. That's also a hotel with heritage and
With a lot of
character. That's a
heritage,
bad
yeah.
example.
It's a stunning
But
hotel.
failing that, I would stay at the Four Seasons because I'm sure it's very beautiful. I've never been, but it also represents a level of comfort in a city that can be a bit of a challenge with traffic, that can be a bit of a challenge with heat and humidity, things like this. The cacophony of a big city
And
like this.
sometimes you want that sure bet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
you do.
But you don't always want it.
No.
And even that sure bet is trying to tell stories. I think because the travel industry understands that authenticity is a word that is like long past its sell-by date.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out what the next version of that is and what the rhetoric around that needs to be. And you have to be incredibly clever about how you do that because people see through it. The kind of people you want going to these hotels, they see through it in a second.
Yeah.
And there's ideas about slowness that are still really valid. That was a big buzzword 6-7 years ago.
Slow travel, where you spend time and just take your time to get to know where you are. Is that what you mean by that?
In the broader luxury travel sphere right
Yes.
now, boats and trains. I mean, trains, Paolo Barletta, who started La Dolce Vita, that amazing new train in Italy, has just launched in Saudi Arabia a train called Dream of the Desert.
I heard about that.
And he is in the process of building one for this country.
Yes, I heard about that.
It's going to go from Alexandria all the way to Aswan.
Yeah. And the sort of the inspiration is the Orient Express, right? Isn't that
the company
original,
is in fact
the
Orient
original
Express,
inspiration?
yes, and everything is meant to sort of refer back. Dream of the Desert, no. Dream of the Desert is not Orient Express. La Dolce Vita is actually part of the Orient Express portfolio. I don't think the Egypt train will be, from what I understand.
But the idea of that luxury train
Absolutely.
experience.
It lends itself really perfectly to this new permutation, this evolution of what luxury travel is, such as that is, because it is slow, it's sustainable, it's electric most of the time. It is meant to tap into culture. The Venice Simplon Orient Express is all about the train. It's a 36-hour ride. You trundle from Paris through the Alps down to Venice. You have this quite sexy, slightly louche, if it goes well, experience on the train,
Well, everyone
last drink at 2 a.m. in the bar singing.
Well, I also think that there's that whole Agatha Christie feel about it, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Someone's going to get murdered on the train, Hopefully not.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you at least get your money back if
Well,
that
you have a
happens
good
for
meal
you. But
first.
exactly. Um, but a lot of the other trains, like La Dolce Vita, is built as much around the experiences that you have when you get off the train. I went on one of the maiden voyages,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, I think you did that right before we met,
I did.
right? I
I
remember
wrote
you
it. I
telling me
wrote it
about
for the
it.
paper, actually, not for HTSI, but for the pink pages of the
Yes.
paper.
Yes.
And we were taken in. We had a private tour of the archives, the state archives in Siena. So we were looking at
Wow.
book covers that had been painted 800 years ago. I
Wow.
mean, it was quite special, into
Yeah.
rooms that aren't normally open to the public. And
Mm.
then you're shepherded back to the train down the hill, and you get on. And Heinz Beck, who is the most Michelin-starred
Mhm,
chef in
mhm,
Italy,
mhm.
there's some sort of culinary order that he founded.
Mm.
He's done all the food.
Yeah.
And the galley on the train is like that
That
big.
big. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, it's
tiny.
tiny,
Yeah,
tiny.
yeah,
So it's pretty amazing when
yeah.
you get on and you're sort of, as you go between Venice and Siena, let's say, you're eating food that's typical of
Of
Emilia
that area.
Romagna, because
Yeah,
that's where you're
yeah.
going through.
It's
So
amazing. It's so well thought out,
it
and it's
is.
so refined in its
Yes.
approach.
And it taps all of the sort of luxury travel touch points
Yeah.
of today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are those touch points?
I think still slow.
Mhm.
I think if you are traveling, if you're a person of any means and education, um, if you're traveling without thinking about sustainability in some form or capacity as it relates to your travel, you're just not doing
Yeah.
the right.
Yeah.
That has to
Well,
be
you're
part of
not
the
plugged in
remit.
if you're not.
That
Yeah,
has
you
to be part of
can't.
the remit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which is why I think it makes sense. And always will think it makes sense to work with a really good travel designer. A lot of high net worth people that we write
Mhm.
to and for at the magazine have travel designers with whom
They
they've
call them
worked.
travel designers? Is that
They
then?
call themselves that, but they're also called that, travel agents.
Yeah, but very bespoke and
Yeah, the
know the
really good
family
one.
or know the couple. They know what they
Exactly.
want.
Yeah,
Yeah, of
over the course of generations, they've
course.
worked, and that's not uncommon. I mean, family offices have these people on
Sure,
retainer,
sure.
but also just families. My friend Emily Fitzroy, who has a company called Bellini Travel, she's the ne plus ultra
Mm,
of
mm.
Italy. If I had a friend who wanted to do anything, I would always send them to her,
Interesting.
because she understands the high, she understands the low, she understands that travel in Italy at its best is a combination of those two things.
Yeah, yeah.
She has incredible access. I mean, basically, literally unfettered
Mm,
access,
mm,
but also
mm.
knows to just take you into Barcalisto in Rome and get you the
Yeah.
special, Marocchino that they do. It's that kind of thing that you would never know.
Alone,
All the
you'll
TikTok
never know it
scrolling in the
alone.
world is not good, because you're not editing. You can't edit, and they do.
Sure,
It's
sure.
curation,
Yeah,
which
of
is a
course.
terribly overused word, but it's true.
It's true. It's true. That's fascinating, Maria. I mean, I've always been curious about the machinations behind this particular industry and how things come together, and how, if you're a luxury consumer, you pick a destination. I mean, that's basically what your world is all about, and how does a consumer get a great experience? I mean, at the end of the day.
But don't you think, I mean, since you did this,
Yeah.
as this is part of your professional
Well, a long
background as
time
well,
ago.
a
Yeah.
long time ago,
Yeah.
but not that much has changed, I think.
No, not much has changed in terms of how the processes work.
Yeah, I mean, it's far more sophisticated. And to
Sure.
your earlier question about AI, yes, AI is going to, the Future Laboratories sent out their 26 predictive report, and they had a target. It's AI is obviously going to play a
Yeah.
role. I think it has a very specific role to play, beyond which it's maybe not terrifically useful until AI can be trusted to process factual information in a like
Sure.
100% legitimate fashion. I'm not sure I'm going to go searching too deep, but I think what AI is currently quite good for is the person who sits down in like Manchester and says, I want 5 days, I have this much money, I want 5 days of sun, I want access to a
Yeah.
beach, and it needs to be within a 4.5 hour
Yeah.
flight of where I am.
Absolutely. And it gives you it blurts out
Yeah.
lots of options.
And then you need to go elsewhere to deepen your
Then you
research on
refine
that.
it.
But that's kind of, that brass tax service is very much,
For
I
sure.
think, the legitimate role of AI.
But won't it also change the industry in the sense that you'll be cutting out a lot of people that are doing that role now? You can bypass. I mean, forget the luxury market, which is where your world
But it's in there
attention
too.
is. Yes, but I think the luxury world, you still need someone to interpret, to dig out
Exactly.
what you need.
Yeah.
But the more average trip, you don't need a travel agent anymore.
You don't.
You can just get on ChatGPT or book your flight and then book your own tours if you want to do a tour. I mean, it is doable.
It's 100% doable.
Yeah.
And I speak the travel agent designer thing. I speak more to
Of course.
the readership of my magazine.
Sure.
To answer your question about where will this influence where they go, how people travel and where they go, I'm sure it will. But I like to think that there will always be an element of whimsy and kind of being influenced by something intuition and being, I mean, I remember 17 years ago, probably, there's a beautiful Italian design magazine called Case d'Abitare, and they dedicated an entire issue to New Zealand because New Zealand was having a bit of a design moment. Big Farron Hay and big architects working there. And there was an article in that magazine about Waiheke Island, and it just stayed in my head, and it stayed in my head, and it stayed in my head. And I finally made it there in 2013 or 2014.
Did it meet your...
Yes.
It did.
Like, I want to live there one day. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of
far out.
It's far away from everything. So actually living in New Zealand, unless you're like properly retiring and can afford to get round.
Or you really want to live off grid.
But that article captured my imagination and it was just on the list.
Yeah, and
that's also true of Egypt.
For sure. And I think you're absolutely, you've nailed it when you say articles about travel are about an aspiration and inspiration.
If they're well done, information, aspiration.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're selling a dream, right? That's basically it. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Malak Fuad, and the show is produced by Chirag Desai. You can leave us a comment on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on Instagram, as well as on our website, and let us know what you thought of the episode. I'll be back next week with a brand new Encore episode, and this time we have all-round rock star Bobby Chinn back in the hot seat. I hope you can join me then.